What's up, everyone? Metal Dave here, along with my co-host Jason McMaster, bringing you another episode of the Talk Louder podcast. Our guest today, Jarvis Leatherby from Night Demon. He's also in Cirith Ungol. He manages a bunch of bands. He has a record label. He knows his heavy metal inside and out. I mean, we just had a real bro down geek fest, and I loved every minute of it. The guy is obviously very passionate about heavy metal in general, and specifically about what he's involved in. And I learned a lot, and it was really, really insightful and just a really cool dude. I was so happy we got him on the show. I think that
he's the epitome of heavy metal will never die. He's tattooed that on his head where some people might have been born with 666. So he's the real fucking deal.
Totally.
And I saw Night Demon going on like 15 years ago or more at Red 7 outside opening for Raven.
Wow.
And it was a while ago. Raven had a different drummer. They had the Pentagram guy. His name's escaped me. I fully apologize and deserve a beating for that. But Jarvis is a one of a kind, and he knows everyone. But the thing is he's not telling you that he knows everyone. He's not name dropping with any agenda. He is the real deal and just loves what he does. And I think that you'll enjoy the line of interrogation we gave him today, because he just ran with it and, was swirling sparklers the whole time he was under interrogation. So
he's what I call the perfect guest.
Exactly.
I mean, he's a good talker. He's got great stories to tell. He's passionate about it on every level. And those are the kinds of guys and girls that we love to have on this show. They make our job very easy. We just kind of say go and he runs.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is probably a third of our guests, they're friends with Jarvis. So that means something too.
Yeah,
so
very well connected and for good reason.
Yeah, take us out, Dave.
Yeah, Jarvis Leatherby today on the Talk Louder podcast.
Jarvis, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful Sunday morning, and I'm happy to be alive.
Yes.
And yeah, it's good to be here. It's good to be on right now with everything, with all the complaints. It's still good to be alive, right?
Yeah,
you got that right.
That's better than the alternative.
And to be able to do the things that make us happy and the things that literally can give us reasons for living, reason to get out of bed. And today I want to target you as being, that's heavy metal, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. It's that, I always thought of heavy metal as a lifestyle, and slowly, as in my youth, you kind of just by immersion, embrace that lifestyle and become it without trying. You know what I mean?
I do.
I started out, playing, you start by listening to it, then you start by playing it, then you get involved in the scene, whether you're, promoting shows or just going as a spectator, starting a band, going to, hanging out with like-minded people. And here I am, 25, 30 years later. And I guess it's a good life. It's a good job,
Yeah. Speaking of that, how did you initially get hooked on rock and roll?
Well, my dad was in a band with Michael Anthony from Van Halen. They were in their first band together.
What?
Far out.
Yeah. And so this was I think probably 69 to 72.
Pasadena area?
Arcadia. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Right. In the neighboring city.
Okay.
And, they were doing Battle of the Band stuff, high school dances. And, I think that when they started out, they were kind of doing, more kind of 60s rock, not psych stuff, but probably like the Kinks or, stuff like that. And then they started going to concerts when they were, at this time, I think they were like in junior high or something. And then they started going to concerts when they got into high school. And, they were going to see like Led Zeppelin and Sabbath and Grand Funk, and everything kind of changed from there. And then, I think, my dad was just having fun doing it. And then Mike he really took it to the next level and got really serious about music. But he had a good background. His dad was like a jazz trumpet player, and like my dad's family was supportive too. But I mean, there was a lot of musicality in Mike's family, and he just had that hunger for it. And but yeah, it's like, so like the Van Halen thing was always around in my household, and Deep Purple and stuff like this. And you kind of get this, whatever your parents listen to when you're young, it kind of always sticks with you, like no matter what it is. And I've talked to many people, and it's kind of always that way, but luckily there was always rock, like hard rock. And when I was young, I didn't gravitate towards it immediately because, what your parents like is not cool. Yeah. And I like when I was pretty young, but old enough to, I would say like maybe 8 years old to, go buy my first tape or whatever, that was right when like the gangster rap thing was like NWA had just come out, and I was a suburban white kid, and somebody showed me this tape at like my private school, and I was blown away because I was like, these guys are talking about sex, they're talking about violence, there's cussing, which, back before the internet, it wasn't, if you're a kid, you heard a cuss word, it's like you're usually like in any kind of media, at least, that's when you stay up late after your parents go to bed and you watch Skinamax or something, so yeah. Like I was just blown away by that, and I was really gravitated towards it. But I remember Two Live Crew, they put out this album, As Nasty as They Want to Be, and it got banned. So you had to be 18 to buy the album, and I was 8. So but there was, the Columbia House thing was happening at the time. Yeah. So I was 8 years old, but I had a penny, and you know what I'm saying? So I went and got like, I got 12 tapes for a penny, and I just filled out the form, and they came in the mail. And what happened is they had a song on that album called The Fuck Shop. And it started with they sampled the Sweet Child O' Mine, the Slash, the opening lick, and it went right into the opening lick of Ain't Talking About Love. And I said, well, first of all, just the sound of those two riffs, just the guitar tones went to virgin ears, like were just, it's, you get this weird tingling inside. It's like, how is somebody making that sound? And immediately I was like, all right, well, fuck this. I'm sending another penny, and I'm getting like all the Sabbath tapes, So so gangster rap got me into rock.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story.
Yeah, that's excellent. So Straight Outta Compton is a reason you're a headbanger.
Yeah. I mean, they were, and then I heard like Run DMC's Rock Box, and Beastie Boys Fight for Your Right to Party, and it's like that just had those elements, and it was like they were simple guitar riffs that I'm like, well, I could play that.
Well, like people still don't realize that's Carrie.
Yeah, right. He did the solo on that. Yeah. And definitely. Yeah, Rick, I have a lot of admiration for Rick Rubin, man.
Yeah, he kind of like created his version of crossover.
Dude, he's for a non-musician and non-engineer. I mean, he's definitely ahead of his time in many ways, over the.
Yeah. So if you were 8 years old when Two Live Crew or NWA came out, what was your first concert?
So my dad took me to Monsters of Rock '88 because Van Halen was headlining.
Yeah.
And I saw Scorpions and Metallica and Dokken, and I was like, I'm sold.
Yep.
You know,
Saw that in Texas.
Specifically Metallica.
Yep.
And I was just like, okay, like this, I know exactly what I want to do with my life. And then a few years later, wow, I guess maybe 5 years later, because, well, like kids were coming to school when the Black Album came out, and they would just be like, there's this tape and it's just black and it's called Metallica and it's incredible. And I was like, there's this other one called And Justice for All, and you need to hear this, you know, and there, people are like, what the hell, you know? But another thing happened when so I'd gone to a Christian school. My parents weren't religious, but I was getting into a lot of fights at public school when I was pretty young, like actually around that age, probably glorifying the gangster rap thing, right? Like, here I'm some white kid and I'm going to fucking, you know, right? I'm in a gang, right? Yeah, whatever. So they put me in private school. The best thing that ever happened to me, man, because I grew up for 7 years with the same 20, 30 kids, and I still have these friendships till today. Like being in a smaller environment like that really kind of helped me, you know, generate great relationships with people, right?
You found your gang.
I did. And we had something to rebel against because we were constantly, you know, I was failing religion class because they would like make us copy the Bible word for word, like in, you know, and so it became a thing that wasn't a choice anymore. But they showed us this video. It's a 3-hour documentary. It's actually on YouTube. You can find it. It's called Hell's Bells. Okay. And it's about the dangers of rock and roll. So this is like 89, I want to say. This is pretty like the height of the satanic panic, you know. And I mean, where you had a bunch of crazy shit going on. I know more about it now. I didn't know at the time, but I mean, it was a total witch hunt on like, I mean, you had school librarians going to jail for talking about nature, you know. I mean, like, so or spiritualism, you know.
Yeah.
So basically, this movie it opened my eyes to so many things that I never knew about. They were like backmasking Stairway on vinyl. They were like, here's a song called Fade to Black that's about suicide. Stay away from these guys. They're playing AC/DC, Hell's Bells. So many things. Cyndi Lauper, She Bop. This is about masturbation, you know? And I'm just like, so I'm in class for 3 hours just making a list of things I need to buy, you know?
Yeah.
And the rest of the class.
That's like a Dear Santa.
Yeah, exactly. The rest
The forbidden fruit.
They were so affected by this and bought into it. And so the day after we watched this movie, the teachers had organized like a CD and tape smashing party, right? So it's almost like an old book burning, right? So me and two other guys, Mike Mall and Doug Clark, we went the other way and we made a bong that day. We didn't know how or what to do with it. We had no weed, but we started a band. And we're like, this is what we need to do. Like, this is it. This is our answer. This is our way out of here, you know? And so it was just me and two other people out of 30. And we found our tribe at that point,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Do you feel like some of your lyrics pretty much had to be of a rebellious stench that may or may not have been about the oppressors, the people organizing the tape smashing party?
I think so.
Yeah.
I was so young that I didn't know how to really write a song. So like we played at our school had a talent show and we went and played one song. We were formed a band, called it Black Opal, which we named it after my dad and Michael Anthony's band that they had. And we covered Anarchy in the UK, but the school was called St. John's. So at the end, instead of saying, again, I'm pissed, destroy, I said, St. John's will be destroyed. And like, people were like, you know, but other kids in the class that didn't have enough balls to kind of be individuals, or they were too afraid to at that point, and I understand, they loved it. You know, they loved it. And like, this was a time where, you know, there's kids there was like 3 guys in the class that we grew up with that we knew. I mean, we knew they were gay. We knew they were gay, but we were in a system where we were constantly being taught how wrong that was. And we had teachers that would make fun of it. They would say like jokes that they thought were funny, like it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, you know, and like things like this. And it never dawned on me then, but these kids were having to like kind of laugh at this. And now that, you know, I don't know what that did to them.
That's painful. That's painful.
I still know a couple of them, and I've never talked about it with them, but it's nice to see that the society has progressed enough so that, you know, they can be kind of who they are now. But I'm just grateful that I got out of that unscathed, because we were all being targeted in some way. That's about right. Whatever we were into, you know. And I remember the teachers that were saying this, one guy specifically, like everybody fucking loved him. And he was like really like the cool guy and in touch with the youth. And, you know, come to find out, a lot of the girls that I'm still friends with, they tell me now about all the times he would, you know, touch their ass and shit like that. You know, it's like, it's such a, I mean, there's a whole nother topic, but what I'm saying, there was, in times of unblind oppression, there's always some good nuggets there, man. If you dig deep enough, you'll find that if you're willing to go against the status quo and you just search into the unknown, into the other side of things, it's not as dark as people tell you it is. You know, there's a lot of brightness in there. And you will find your people, you know. So it's all a blessing, you know.
Yeah, it's the old fear of the unknown cliche that people say you're afraid of what you don't understand.
Absolutely.
Then you get a little bit educated, like you're saying, and it's like, oh, okay, it's not so bad, or I can deal with this, or whatever.
Well, yeah. the shit that's happening in front of your eyes that you may or may not be able to put together in your young mind, when you realize that shit later on and you feel for those, and I'm sure they felt for you being made fun of for your long hair, if you had long hair, or if you shaved your head, or if you wore a Dirty Kiss t-shirt to school every day, or, you know, just that's a whole, I mean, that's what I write songs about. That's why I threw that out immediate, because I feel like, you know, that's what the first few Metallica records, the lyrics are all about, just coping mechanisms and fighting back and realizations of like, you know, why are you trying to teach me this when I know that it's fucked up? So I think music is a great way of expression, and I'm not telling anybody in this room right now that. And I feel like you have all of this as gasoline in your giant truck that you are driving across the universe. And I just want to, if I forget anything, tell me, because I know I'm going to. You're now managing bands. You write songs. You probably produce records. You have a record label. You have a podcast. You book tours for people. You have guested countless. You know, you're in one of your favorite bands now. You're in fucking Cirith Ungol, who's from your home. Are you from Ventura?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah.
And they're from Ventura. I want to touch on that in a second. The fact that all of these things you are actively doing makes me need a fucking nap. And it's so impressive, and it obviously means that it has to be a full-time thing. I don't know when you clock in at your gig at Starbucks. I mean, how are you? Okay, let me just pull one out of your hat, of your many hats. You've got a hat collection, right? Yeah, I just went down a bunch of your hats. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, I don't know that one. I'm familiar with most of your hats. So I just feel like you're one of these guys, and we all are, that have booked a 150 date tour and you come home with nothing and your credit cards are maxed out and 4 flat tires and, I got no air in the tire, but I'm a metalhead,
Yeah.
and you're singing the blues you're in the fucking red every time you come home. Explain why you keep beating yourself in the head. I mean, I know why, we know why, but how do you make that balance out with either the extreme passion and love and gigantic heart that you have for it, which I feel like I'm answering the question for you, on top of financially being stable in order to pay the rent and buy printing cartridges to print out contracts for deals that you're doing for the guys in Satan, and shit like that. Just wondering, give us a day in a life and how you got here.
Right. So, well, back to what you first said, that music is a way of people expressing themselves. I fully believe, people always want to know the meaning of life. Like, I think I've discovered it universally. The meaning of life is self-expression. And that goes for any trade or just anything that anybody wants to do. We're here to be productive. And when people aren't expressing themselves as individuals to what they truly feel, that's when they hate their life, and 78%, I've got this statistic of people in America hate what they do, so, but again, fear of the unknown, right? That's what keeps people from going there. I had it a long time. I still have it. Every day I wake up, my thing is this: if I'm not waking up at least 3 nights a week at 3 a.m. going, oh shit, like, what am I doing? Then I'm not living.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have to go where, not to quote Star Trek or anything, but you have to boldly go where no man has gone before. There's still new ways of doing things. So what keeps me going is I try things that people haven't done, and it keeps me excited because you just it's a wild card about how things are going to work. I'm way into like productivity hacks. I read a ton of books, and they're mostly kind of like self-help books. So I found different systems that work, and I think the best thing is, they call everybody talks about work-life balance. I have a work balance. So my job is my life. I love music, and I love business. So I tie those two together, and that's what I do. I don't do it for any other industry at all, So, are there hard financial times? Sure, but I make a pretty good living, and but I'm working all the time. The clock in and clock out, it's a 24/7 job. I mean, right now I have 2 bands on tour. I have a band putting an album out. I'm playing 2 gigs next weekend back to back. One's being filmed for a live concert movie, so you just have to compartmentalize and focus on what you're doing when you're doing it and be completely present in that. It's tough, but that's what at least I keep trying to do that mentally. And the other thing is this, and I recommend this for everybody: just do a little bit every day, schedule time and do it, and then have a cutoff time. Because I work every band that I manage and bands that, I put out on my label or bands I play in, I give a certain amount of time each day to every entity. And so it keeps me on top of everything, because what happens is, if I say, okay, I need to, I need to approve a layout for the next Midnight album, right? And it's due on Friday, but I've got all these things going on. It's Monday. I'm going to do that Thursday night so I can get it in on time. Here's what happens on Thursday. Your car breaks down.
Yeah.
your landlord calls and says, hey man, there's a busted pipe in the building, we got to come in. And then you look, okay, cool. And then you're like, then you go to Starbucks and do it, and you're looking at the layout and something's wrong, and you send it back to the artist and they're like, hey, I'm out today, or I'm on vacation, or they just don't reply. So it's best to just, if you can keep consistency, you're always on top of it and you kind of always know what's going on. The other thing is I have a full-time paid assistant. So,
Wow.
and that person is not like, hey, go pick up my dry cleaning, or, hey, what color tie am I going to wear today? That person is like, hey, here's the schedule. This is what we're selling today. This is what the email blast is today. These are the social media posts that happened today. And they're done in advance. Here's, all the merch that needs to be shipped out. Here are the bills that need to be paid. I want you to work on some art for something that's going to happen next month. Let's start throwing around some ideas, so you always kind of have to work in advance. So one of the other mottos I have, especially because I tour and I do 150 shows a year, that's not counting travel days. That's just me performing. I have a motto that every day I wake up and I look at my quote unquote to-do list, and I'm never going to get anything done. So you have to prioritize. And I say, if I was gone right now for 4 weeks and could only do one thing, what would it be? And then I do that. I do that first, and then it really relieves the stress, because there's never enough time to do everything, but there's always time to do the important things. So that seems like a long answer, but I could talk about it in detail for about 5 hours. So that's the gist of it.
I like it. I feel like you have you're on top of it.
You have to be, because here's the thing. This goes just with my choice of who I surround myself with. There's so much irresponsibility in this world, and there's so much blame placing and shaming. I can't be around people like that. I have to be around people that take responsibility for not only their actions, but I take responsibility for everything, and it helps. If somebody cuts me off on the freeway, I'm like, well, it's my fault. I shouldn't have been going that fast. Maybe they're having a bad day. I've been there, and I let it go, and it doesn't affect me. But being responsible, Stan Lee said, about what's the Spider-Man line? Like with great responsibility comes great power. With great power comes great responsibility. But you can reverse that. With great responsibility comes great power. And when you can actually be in charge of things and in charge of other people's career, the bands that I manage, they're not poor. This is their life's work and their legacy. There are a lot of financial things involved, whether it's paying somebody's health insurance or their rent. It's not just booking a gig. And being responsible gives me a lot of power, and I have to be able to honor that and control that in a way. So it's prideful to be responsible for somebody. It's like, if you're responsible for your children, there's no excuse, you're going to do whatever it takes, so to put yourself, I've put myself in the hunger mindset. When Night Demon first started touring, we were homeless for 4 years in our 30s. And that was tough. That was tough, because we had told ourselves, look, a lot of people we're going to get a lot of pushback on this. We lost relationships because of it with our significant others. Our family were like questioning, like, hey man, what is going on? Your sister's got a PhD and you are living in a van. And it's like, okay, but like, this is who I am. And every day was a little baby step to where one day, you're so busy doing your life, you lift your head up and go, hey, like I've built something here for myself, and I have my fallback plan is the relationships that I've created. I'm known in the industry as a likable, reliable person, who people can count on, and that's, you can't get that on paper. You have to get that at face-to-face relationships.
Yeah, that's wealth. That's also wealth.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul. So like you can have all of these, material things are good, but it does nothing. Nobody remembers you for the things you have,
Right.
They remember you for your contributions,
That's right.
Yeah.
I love that. I was going to ask about the business aspect of your life because it seems to be equally as time consuming as your music. And I love that explanation you just gave. Just real quick for people that are listening, what bands do you manage?
I managed Night Demon, my own band, Cirith Ungol, who I'm the de facto bass player for, Satan,
Yeah.
Midnight, and Visigoth.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want a handful. I mean, to me, those are my, they each are legends in their own right. And it's a cool little gang.
Yeah, and I wanted to hear those names because I know our listeners will recognize them. You're not just managing the local bar band. These are bands that are on major tours, and so it is a lot to handle. Managing one band and being in a band would be more than I could handle. So, hats off to you for managing 5 bands and then pursuing your own.
So the youngest group that you manage, I'm gonna just riff here, might be Midnight.
No, actually. Well, see, they wear masks, so you'll never know how old they really
are. Yeah.
Surprise you. Visigoth is the youngest band I managed.
Oh, okay.
But they're the first band I ever managed. So I've managed them for, I think, 8 or 9 years. And look, I never wanted to be a band manager. It was never my passion at all. I'm an artist, but I just was friends with people and I came across this all happened naturally with everybody that I manage. It was just like, okay, these guys are at a crossroads and they really need help. And they're about to make some crucial, possible career crushing moves, And so what can we do to help, And it kind of just evolved into that. And, I don't have any contracts with my bands. They're all handshake deals. I don't want to lock anybody into anything. I've never been fired. Ever. I just, when we're done, we're done. I mean, here's the thing. I think I'm the best band manager type because I'm the guy actually out there doing it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that manage bands that
never leave the office.
Hold on a sec. Rob from Cirith Ungol just walked in the room. Say hi to these guys.
Hey, how's it going, Rob? Good to see you, man.
How are you?
Cirith Ungol. Yeah.
Cameo appearance.
Nice.
On a podcast.
Nice. Anyway, but the thing is, there's a lot of and bless them. We need business people in this business, but a majority of them, they got into the music business because they love music, but they're like, oh, but I never could play an instrument. That's what every guy will, or man or woman will tell you in the music industry. I love music, but I could never figure it out. I'm just not musically inclined.
Yeah.
Well, basically, I mean, I'm not. I just worked really hard at it, So it's like, I'm the guy out there doing it. So I can book a tour or deal or work with an agent and just go, that ain't going to work. It's for you sitting behind a desk collecting a percentage and just going, well, that's the routing and that's this and that. And that's what's available. And I'm like, well, guess what? I've toured in Idaho 20 times. And I know there is only one venue in Boise, but there ain't because I've developed these relationships with people out there where I'm like, I know a guy that has a freaking basement or a community center, and he's actually the best promoter you're going to find because he's not a guy doing 30 shows a month at his club. He loves this band and cares about it, and he's going to work harder than anybody is on this whole tour, and this is going to be a huge success, So it's something to be said for the guy that's actually out there doing it. If you're managing a business, if you manage a McDonald's, it's probably best that you know how to mop the floor too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that experience. It's the real world experience. You can't teach that from a cubicle. You gotta play the dumpy dive in Boise, Idaho. And then you gotta sleep on someone's couch and realize that there's a cool underground club that's not on anyone's radar, that's actually the place you need to play the next time you're in town.
Absolutely.
And you don't get that if you're not in the van.
Plus, it's like, a lot of agents, they have relationships with promoters because they send them a lot of shows, and they usually have leverage because they have a bigger act that promoter is really going to want. So they'll take a smaller band or whatever. That's just business favors. That doesn't really do anything more for the band besides get them a performance. It's not like their heart is into it, right? And for me, it's like, the promoters that I call, like, I've gotten fucked up with these guys. You know what I'm saying? Like I've spent some quality time with these people in the trenches. So it's a totally different, I could call these guys at midnight and they'll answer the phone, So yeah. It's a real blessing to be able to help other artists with the relationships that I've created. And I would never bring anybody something. I would never ask anybody for a favor if it's not going to mutually benefit both parties, because then you use that up and then you're done, Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. You got to do the right thing.
It sounds very, well, I don't want to use the word old school, but that's an old art. That's a tribal, that's smoke signals via, in our world, it would have been, early 80s. The tape trading, the obviously pre-internet, and where I'm going with this is the fanzines and the tape trading lists that had phone numbers and addresses to people that you could call at midnight and they would answer the phone and help you find a gig and help you find a crash pad and help you. And the metalheads stole that from the punk rock dudes. And it just kind of like melded into this whole thing. And it was a communication. It was like the Pony Express. And I feel like, everybody has, in a metal band, has stolen that idea or fallen through with that idea when they hit the road, and it's all, at that point, it's just word of mouth and communication. But you can't do it unless you're at least, making, before cell phones, it was $100 to call anybody to work out some kind of a deal, to route anything, to even jot it down in a little notebook. So, here's what we talked about and here's how much money, still cool with that, kind of just when you settle up. Doing business back then, it sounds to me like, and things are, of course, different because of the tools made ready for you to use. But everything is still exactly the fucking same, especially since your percent of what you're taking for managing a band is probably not what a normal rock band's manager is taking. No. And you're not looking.
I'll be completely transparent, just because I think people should know.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not going to give you my tax return right now, but I'm just saying, like, no. I take 10 to 15% of the profit. So that's after all bills are paid, like everything. That's what I take, because, and again, I have a staff that I pay. There's like administration fees I'm hosting all the web stores, websites, all that.
Yeah. But
the thing is, it in order to make a living, what it does is it pushes me to make that much more money for my bands. Because I'm like, well, here's what I need to make. So that means you guys are going to make this much. Most managers will take anywhere from 15 to 20, sometimes 25%, some of these bigger management companies, of the gross. So that's before the van rental's paid, the bus rental, the merchandise. All this shit costs money, And so being completely transparent, that is my system. And with my label, I do only 50-50 deals. So it's like, look, I'll advance all the money to get this record made and release it. And I have the same distribution as all the majors. So, and look, again, I have relationships. The head guy at the distributor, I have a key to his house. Okay. He's the head metal guy.
Yeah.
It's like Sony doesn't have that. You know what I mean? Like, so I like doing 50-50 deals. That's the old Greg Ginn Black Flag SST model. It's like, look, I'll front all the costs. We'll get this record made. I get paid back first. When it's recouped, like, we just split the profits. You do your job, I do my job. There's never a dispute about money. It's not like any of this, or I give some band a big advance and they think this is great, and that money is gone within a week and they never see a penny. You know, it's the old, we grew up in the punk rock scene. The only other heavy metal band out of Ventura ever was Cirith Ungol, you know, and my lifetime has been half old school and half internet, you know, so I do remember those days. Even when I started touring when I was 17. I'm 42 now. There was internet, but I mean, we were still using, you know, Atlas road maps. We would drive 2 hours in the wrong direction sometimes. You know, there was, you know, so I do remember that. My cell phone bill at the time, I was one of the first guys to have a cell phone in my group of friends. And my cell phone bill was, I think, $3,000 in August of 1998, you know? We used to have the phone cards. I know all that. But anyway, transparency is what I'm all about. You know, it's like, you gotta, that's it. Those are my deals. And I think that's what's fair, you know? Because again, I'm a guy in a band. Think about, you know, bands that have 5 members, they have to split something, you know, and the agents are taking their 10 or 15 too. So sometimes, you know, you're getting 60% of your gross on a tour, and then your expenses come in, then you split that 5 ways. That's why bands don't make it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Wow, man. That's all just, I love the perspective. You know, we have musicians on this podcast all the time, and we talk about the art and the music. But this insight into the business aspect of it is really interesting. I appreciate you sharing that with us, because I did want to pick your brain, because you're obviously very good at that and trusted, and you do have a good reputation. So I was curious how you make that work, and that's a really impressive balancing act you got going there.
Don't be greedy, because, you know, like if you've got a good, you know, I hate to say this, like, as an artist would hate to say this, but I'm also an artist. If you have a good product, you know, that's what they call it in the industry.
Yeah.
That's it. Just get it out there, man. It'll do what it does, you know, like you can't, but if you're cutting off the supply that's creating the product, you're not going to get any more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, I'm in life, and like I said, I mean, the bands they're with me. Like it's not meant to end, you know. I mean, everything does end, and if it does, it's fine. But like, look, I know bands that have fired managers and gotten new management that have contracts with these managers. So now they're paying 40 to 50% of their gross earnings to 2 different management companies, their former management company that does nothing, and their new one, because they're locked into a deal. And the management company's like, look, we had you for 7 years, and in year 3, you fired us. That we're not going to stop collecting money on you. Like, you know, then I think that's fucking bullshit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Let's shift gears for a minute. That's all interesting stuff. I really enjoyed that. But I do want to talk about your music. Talk about Night Demon. The latest album, I believe, is Outsider.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's actually it's a concept record, which was nobody wants to hear. But it was I wrote a film script. That's like my side hustle there. So I'm really like film is my big passion outside of music. And I've written a few scripts before, and I mean, nothing ever got made. I just kind of do it as an exercise to get these ideas out of my head, and it kind of helps with songwriting. But I've really been a student of actually a screenplay writing, and it's a totally different art form, and there are formulas to it and stuff like that. But I wrote a film script, and during the pandemic, which was a blessing for us, because Night Demon had done, prior to 2020, Night Demon had done, I think we had done 600 shows in that 4-year span. And so I for us to have a forced break was great, man. We felt like we were kids on summer vacation again. We were getting together every day and writing. We had time to write. So I said, hey, I got this script that I worked on for a couple of years, and like, let's see what we could do to like adapt music to this, like take a different approach instead of just, hey, I have a riff and like, oh, that sounds like this. Let's write it about the devil. It's like, let's see what we can do here. So we wrote the album to the script, and what we did, I mean, Night Demon has short songs. We're not like I think a lot of metal bands, the songs are too long. I mean, I just always thought that. I came from the school of punk rock where it's like just get in and get out, and you can play more songs live, Yeah. So it's a concept record that's under 35 minutes. But yeah, so it's great because when it came out, people kept wanting to listen to it again instead of like, here's this double album. Like what, like turn your phone off, lock the doors, make sure your kids are tucked in, right? Like, so, but look, I mean, every album that we've done has started out as a concept album and fallen off the tracks. It's just such a difficult thing to do, and have it make sense, And what we did too is we wrote a synopsis of the story inside of the album artwork, and then on the flip side we have the lyrics, and the lyrics were written much more metaphorically, so the songs could stand on their own. Because as Jason will tell you, like lyric writing in a literal sense is just bad songwriting. Oh, then the guy did this, then he did that. You have to have the listener be able to interpret it in things in their own way. But we did tell the story in the album, because I always felt that there's so many concept albums that have been released where like you don't really know the story and the band doesn't really tell you. And to me, that means it's just bad writing, because if it was good, they'd tell you what happens.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, that's the deal. And actually, we have just, I'm not going to say too much about this right now, but we have just, the script has just been picked up by a producer and a director that I really admire, and we'll be going into production next year. So it's going to be a feature.
Congrats.
Wow.
That's
Man,
awesome.
That is
Thanks.
Awesome. You mentioned a couple times during our conversation the influence of punk rock, and when I was doing my homework on you, there's a Rancid connection. Lars and Matt recorded backup vocals on one of your tracks or something. How do you know the Rancid guys, and how did that come about?
Those guys are, I mean, they're pretty out in the open now, but for years have been, I guess, closet metalheads. And, they're Bay Area dudes. So we played up in the Bay Area with Death Angel, and Brian Liu.
Yes.
And Chuck Billy were there, and they're like, hey, Lars from Rancid's here and he wants to meet you. Yeah, and he was there with his kids, and he's just a super nice guy, and we just hit it off. We just started talking about a lot of stuff. I mean, like, we could talk about punk stuff, and we're probably the only one of the few people that had a show like that can, and we just kept a connection and became friends. And then he's like, hey, Matt Freeman has this other band, Charger. They're kind of like a Motorhead thing. And so Matt just sent me a box of records. And so I was just like, hey, we had a more kind of punk kind of track with some gang vocals. And I go, it'd be great to get you guys on it. So I flew up to San Francisco, and we did it in the studio that they record all their albums at. And it was just a fun, easy thing, and kind of keeps that bridge for us with punk. And like I'm also a lot of my history is I was a concert promoter, and I back when I was like from the age like 17 to 20, I was doing a lot of kind of smaller punk shows that turned into big stuff. Like I was doing Slayer. I actually spent a good chunk of my college fund that my grandparents set aside for me to help with the UFO reunion when Shanker came. For the West Coast shows. I was the first guy to bring Dark Funeral to the West Coast. I was a part of that. A lot of things when I was young. It just goes to show. I mean, I've been on all ends of this business, and really kind of dedicated myself to it. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here, but I put on a punk fest an annual fest out here called the Nard Fest that it's in honor of Nardcore, which was our scene, Oxnard hardcore. There's a lot of bands like Dr. No, Ill Repute, Stalag 13, Aggression. Like the skate punk thing was kind of born out here. And I was the kid that was in a metal band and the only metal band in town. And so we could only play punk shows because there were only punk bands. And a lot of those guys really respected us for our musicianship because that was a time when, you know, in the late 80s, there was before the crossover thing really happened, like, man, if you were a long hair at a punk gig in California, you'd get beat up, you know? So when I came in the next generation and it was accepted but the punks were really getting into Slayer and DRI and
a good sort of like frame and time. I apologize for interrupting, but a good sort of like a beacon is when Mike Muir had really long hair. You remember that time? It's about 86, 87, 88.
I think like, and when they did like, you know, How Will I Laugh Tomorrow, like a ballad, you know, and yeah, really, I mean, they were the more, I think you're right. They were probably the most out front commercial band to cross those boundaries.
Unafraid. Unafraid.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But then you saw a lot of bands doing it, like Corrosion and, you know, you had your DRIs, Excel, Dr. No, who comes from our town, you know, which Slayer covered Mr. Freeze on their punk tribute album, you know. So
I just want to say there sure is a lot of metalheads that need to be writing all this shit down because all of those bands we just made a shopping list of. Metalheads need to hear that shit.
Yeah.
Because that's all the shit that like Jeff Hanneman and they were all into that. They were all into that. So.
Oh yeah.
I love that. I do remember, Jason and I are old enough to remember the days when metalheads and punks did not mix.
Yeah.
And
it's silly because it's like, you know, who doesn't love the Ramones or Fear or like Misfits, you know, or Verbal Abuse, Attitude Adjustment. There's so many like great bands like
MDC.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
MDC is super. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, man. I love it all.
Tell us about your involvement with Cirith Ungol. Now, there was just something in the news recently where you guys made an announcement that 2024 is going to be your last year of touring or existence, or what's the story? And I think you have an album coming out, or
right.
Bring us up to date on Cirith Ungol.
Right. So the band had quit in 92 and or 91, I think. Well, they weren't a band for 25 years. The guys basically sold their equipment and said, fuck the rock and roll industry. They'd been a band since they started in 71.
Yeah.
And basically that whole time, you know, lived through the 70s and 80s and like we're putting out records, but never got to tour. Like, you know, just disenfranchised with being from Southern California, playing the Sunset Strip game, but not ever going glam. And, you know, but look, it's just a thing that nobody does. Again, this is a totally long story that I'm going to try and make short, but they were just disenfranchised with everything. And it's a band that everybody wanted to see. There was a whole new generation of fans when the internet was out, you know, and it took me a lot of convincing. But basically the band reunited in 2016. And yes, we have a new record coming out next week. We're doing a live album and concert film at the Roxy. They haven't played the Roxy since 1983. There's a famous bootleg from that show that we're basically recreating. But yeah, here's that.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Since this is a video podcast, I'm here at our headquarters right now.
I might even have that flyer.
Yeah, at HQ. So I'll bring you this is the Cirith Ungol rehearsal room here.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's Tim Baker right there, the voice.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim.
Legend.
Yes.
There you go. So, yeah. But, yeah, and here's the Wall of Fame here. And basically, I mean, look, if you kind of look at it, I mean, like, here's some old newspaper articles, like these guys just getting. So this newspaper is from September 23rd, 1978. And it says, heavy metal band is still only 10. It's basically talking about how they're not getting any traction and nobody's picking up on what they're doing, and there's no scene here, you know. And this one here, look at this one from where are we at here? This is from the early 90s, and it says, legions of European metal fans cheer the sonic assault of Cirith Ungol, but where's the hometown crowd?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Cirith Ungol doesn't have to pose to be rock stars. They're the real thing. It's like, you know, so, but then look, we reunite, they get a proclamation and the key to the city here, you know, like things happen, you know? So you gotta, my people ask me a lot of times, like, what's the secret to longevity? And my answer is longevity is the secret. Just stick around long enough. I mean, look at Watchtower's playing again. You guys playing in Europe. Like, come on.
Never
you know
break. I've always said never break up the band. Even if you're sitting on your ass for 20 years, never break up the band. The phone's going to ring, you know, sometime, somewhere. We recently had, I have to get this in, we recently had Brian Slagle on the show.
Sure. Good buddy.
And he goes off, I'm sure, and he goes off on Cirith Ungol, and he talks about exactly what you've been talking about, how he goes to some festivals over in Europe, and there's kids running around Cirith Ungol swag on everywhere, and he's like, wait a minute, something's going on here, because he knows that back in the day, Ventura doesn't really have a scene. And you know, we're talking about when Brian worked at Oz, the little record store, and he talked about how Ventura was a sleepy little like surf town or something, where he went at Christmas and Thanksgiving to visit his grandma or some shit. And he's like, there's a fucking metal band from Ventura. That's Grammy's house, you know, or whatever. And I just thought it was fucking awesome how the way you talk about it and where you guys are and where you're from, this kind of like, this tree has roots and it's growing fruit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's talk about the DIY thing in 1981, Cirith Ungol, that Frost and Fire album, they released that on their own because they couldn't get any attention from labels. They were way ahead of their time on that. Metal bands were not putting out their own records. And it wasn't a 7-inch. It was a freaking beautiful 12-inch that had Michael Whalen cover art, you know, and it's become iconic.
Yes.
But like when I was growing up, you would find that in the dollar bin at thrift stores around here. Now those pressings go for $1,000 on eBay, you know?
Yeah.
Again, you stay in the game. But the short answer of the retirement is, you know, it's been a good road. When the band reunited, we thought maybe there'd be one performance. It's been 8 years. It's been 2 new studio albums. It's been it's going to be 2 live albums now, another single, and 35 plus shows all over the world. But we're gearing up for a big year. We're going to do 30 shows probably next year, worldwide, Australia, Japan, Europe, South America, all over the States, Canada. And I mean, look, you know, I mean, nobody's getting any younger, and the band's playing at a high level, and it's good to go out on top. And when you're 68 years old, sometimes, I mean, I think it's a bittersweet thing. I mean, these guys are in the other room here, but I'm just saying, like, you know, I think they're a bit sad about it, but also it's kind of like, you know, we've all been to the farewell tours and just gone again and again. And it's all a money thing. And this isn't about a money thing. This is about like, let's go out on top, and let's, you know, I was in Germany when Mark the Shark from Manila Road died. I was there with him like that day.
Wow.
And he was a dear friend of ours. And like I mean, anybody could die at any point, right? But the fact that it seems that in death is when all of our notoriety comes, you know? So it is nice to give the fans a chance to say, look here, this is the last time you get to celebrate with us one last time. And, you know, it means the shows are more meaningful to us and to the audience. And we're giving everybody a chance for this, you know, and all the promoters are coming to the table, which is great, you know, and you don't want to see something flipping. I hate to say that the magic I will say not the magic, but the sheen, I think was tapering a little bit too, because it's like when they first got back together, of course, it's like, holy fuck,
Yeah.
it's still a big deal, but I don't know. There's been a lot of deliberation about this for the last few years, to be honest, and just talking like where are we going with this, and everything does end. How do we want it to end? We don't want it to end how it ended in 1991, where the band just played a terrible show. Nobody cared and just dissolved and fuck the music industry. It's for clowns. I wasted 20 years of my life doing this. I'm going to go get a real job,
Yeah. Yeah. Give us the album title so people know what to look for. When
Dark Parade.
Dark Parade. Okay.
Yeah.
Cirith Ungol, Dark Parade. And when does that come out?
October 20th.
Oh,
so I don't
okay.
know before then. So if it doesn't, yeah. So yeah.
So by the time people are listening and watching this podcast, it'll be available, so you can look for it. Dark Parade, Cirith Ungol. That's really cool. The reason I asked about the 2024 retirement is because there does seem to be a second wave of interest. And if you guys put out this album and then you do the tour and you gain some traction, do you decide maybe to continue, or are you confident in saying, look, when this runs its course, it's over?
You know what's fucking funny? Rob, who you just saw, Rob Garvin from Cirith Ungol, ran into Nikki Sixx the other day, and they were talking about the old days and shit. And yeah, he mentioned to me too, it's like, so we're going to pull a Motley? And I'm like, no, it's just, it has been brought up. What if we get a huge offer to come out of retirement? I guess we cross that bridge when it comes. I'd like to say, no, that's not going to happen. And look, I mean, we still have an infrastructure. I mean, I'm still going to take care of the legacy of the band and the assets. And we don't want to have what happened 30 years ago, where you just quit as a band and then the bootleg market takes over. I mean, we own catalog. We have a merchandising business that's big, and I'm going to keep going. I mean, basically do what Slayer's doing now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. All these things are up for discussion, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to try my hardest to make sure that some kind of comeback like that doesn't happen again, especially because there's a lot of momentum right now. And if you step away from it, man, and you come back, when everybody's really older but the band, I think the band's going to continue playing and probably writing music. And, it's like, they really enjoy doing this again, So, I don't know. We'll see. But if I put my money on it right now, 2024 is the end of 2024 is the goodbye.
Where is the tour routed? Where will people be able to see you in 2024?
We are waiting until the end of the month to start announcing this stuff. We have a whole schedule with promoters about how we're going to roll this out, because there's a certain way that you have to do it in order to avoid conflicts as far as certain pre-sales and stuff like that. And there's a pecking order of who gets what, because there's going to be final shows announced in certain countries, and there's going to be some one-offs that are going to be announced later that piggyback on a festival that basically needs to sell some tickets up front.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
So
back to Night Demon. I saw you recorded a single, I believe, and there's a video on your website. Your website, by the way, is excellent. People that are interested should go check out the Night Demon website. I can tell you're very professional about it. You keep it updated. It looks great. The media all over it is really cool. But I'm talking specifically about a video you did with Uli Jon Roth.
Yeah.
When, he came up and did In Trance with you guys at a gig in Germany. And first of all, let me just say your vocals on that performance are amazing.
Thank you.
You did a great job. How did that come about? How did you get Uli up there with you?
So In Trance was a song that we just kind of messed with, and we covered a couple times. We played some pretty big German fests and thought like, this is good, man. This one's going to really bring it home, you know? Cause it's like you when you get around drunk Germans, like that's the only way to make them cry, because they're just, you know, so if you get them drunk enough and then you play an old ballad from their home, that's how you get them, you know? And then the t-shirts start saying we're not a band. We're just traveling t-shirt salesmen these days, you know? So you gotta do that. But no, really. So we just kind of messed with the song before. And so what happened was we ended up playing the Rock Hard Festival, and Uli was scheduled he was in the next slot above us. And so I was friends with his agent, and I said, hey man, can you get Uli to, what did you think? Can you get him to come out and play in trance with us? And then Uli's like, fuck no, I'm not going to fucking go out before my set and play my hit with these California kids. Like, you know? So later that night we were in the hotel bar, and it was great because it was like Saxon, Night Demon, Armored Saint, and Uli and his band, and we're all drinking, and I'm like, this is incredible just to be here, you know? And I hit him up about it again, and he was telling Biff from Saxon, like, this guy's out of his fucking mind, you know, all this stuff. So I just kept pressing the issue, and about a year and a half went by, and Night Demon was going to headline it was our first big festival headliner in Europe. And we were headlining a festival, and it was sold out. And I said, we got to bring something special to this. So I hit up Uli's agent again, and I said, look, like, here's the deal. Let's make something happen. I'll fucking pay him or whatever. And he's like, no, you shouldn't have to like pay him for that, you know? And I said, well, look, let me just like give him some money. Like, I'll fly him out and just give him a couple bucks or whatever. Like, but we really want to have it happen. And his agent really understands. He knows Night Demon, and he knows what we're about and what we bring to the table. So he's trying to explain it to Uli, like, look, this is going to benefit you, man. You know, like, you're going to play in front of like an audience that already likes you, but doesn't really go see you, you know?
Bingo.
Right. So he kept saying no. And about, I think 5 days before the show, he agreed. So we bought him a plane ticket, and he came to the show. I mean, this is a long story, but like we actually have a podcast. If you listen to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast, episode 2, there's a shit ton of people on there talking about this event and how it happened. But basically, to make it short, he showed up. He didn't want to rehearse. We rented a rehearsal space in Hamburg, but he didn't want to rehearse. And we're like, fuck, like, we really need to rehearse. So he ended up showing up like an hour before we went on. We ran through things backstage. No, the audience didn't know it was going to happen. So we did it on the encore. He just kind of glided out there in his Uli way. And he had his guitar. He had fucking dream catchers and feathers hanging from him and shit. And like, it was amazing. But we played that, and then we played Top of the Bill as well. And somebody had recorded like a bootleg recording of it. And we just took the camera audio, and it wasn't bad. And we said, hey, let's put this out on a 7-inch. And Uli was down for it, and the rest is history.
That's
That's incredible. Talk
is incredible.
Talk about dreaming and dreams coming true. And now you're in Cirith Ungol, and you're just doing all these great things. We could talk for another 10 hours. You realize this. But we're gonna wrap this up.
Yeah. One thing before I go, I'll put this to you, Jason. So I hung out with Van Stavern last night.
Oh, cool.
And me and Christian Larson have been really trying to get an SA Slayer thing happening.
Okay.
And you're the obvious choice as the vocalist.
Yeah.
But I'm putting this out to the public right now. Okay. Mm-hmm. As a call to arms to anybody listening to this, to please start publicly requesting this, and what we're willing to offer. And I'm speaking for Christian here, but what we've talked about is, for Hell's Heroes 2025, he's willing to book Sacred Reich, Riot 5, Dangerous Toys, and we're going to we'll get everybody's main projects there. So there's no conflict. There's no emotional conflict. There's no scheduling conflict, and it'll be in Texas. And we're pushing for an official SA Slayer reunion show. The money's there. The people are there. And this is it. This is a call to arms. 2025, spring of 2025. We want to see this happen.
I'm already in the parking lot.
Wow. Wow, there's an exclusive. How about that?
Let's get some fan feedback. Let's get some petitioning here. But Donnie's into the idea. I got to convince McLean. But again, look, we'll put Sacred Reich on the bill, and it'll be an incredible vibe and feeling.
Yeah.
Wow. And people,
Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah, definitely. Man, Jarvis, it's been so cool getting to know you today. I have to admit, I'm a little late to the Night Demon party, but I've been cramming for this interview, and I'm loving everything I hear. So I'm late to the party, but you're gonna have a hard time getting rid of me now. And and our mutual friend Sean Weingartner, who lives here in Austin, of course, has been singing your praises for as long as I can remember. So it's time for me to get on board, and I'm glad we had this chance to talk to you and get to know you a little bit. You guys, as Jason likes to say, you're bringing back metal. It's the metal that we grew up on, traditional heavy metal, black leather, bullet belts, flying V's, and I love it. So thanks for all you're doing.
An appearance by the Reaper,
His name is Rocky. His name is Rocky.
Rocky the Reaper. Yeah, I like it.
Rocky the Reaper. Yeah. So yeah, man, thank you so much for joining us today. On behalf of my co-host Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave, along with our special guest today, Jarvis Leatherby on the Talk Louder podcast.